This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
So there are two methods that the gurus write about, and you can give me your thoughts on both of these. One is the Snowball method, and the other is the Avalanche method, because they all have to have a winter theme, I guess, right? That's what it comes down to.
That can only be cold.
It can only be cold, absolutely. So before we talk about each of them, what is your general opinion of both of those concepts?
Well, my general opinion I can sum up this way. I can never keep those two terms straight. I have to look them up because to me, they are gimmicks. It's just, I don't know, does it sell a book maybe? Or does it get a person to click on an article? It's certainly not methods that are actually overly helpful in most cases. They have their differences and there is some value to them, but it's a kind of a gimmicky phrasing, I think.
I think the paradox of all the financial media for me is that it is an opportunity when they do have someone with a few good thoughts to rub together and they do make some good points. It's an excellent teaching opportunity or source of perspective or information. But the bulk of what's on there is not that, right? The bulk of the guests that are there to sell the financial inflation aspirational model of how you get rich by picking stocks. And not only that, so when I do, bother to look through and see if there's any clips of souls that I think might be useful in terms of understanding and helping educate people, then they run these ads in advance of it. And the ads are all from the sponsors. And of course, the sponsors are the predatory, as I call them, because they're designed to specifically, attract people like an addiction, like a gambling thing. And they incent them with all the hot buttons. And those are the ads that you have to sit through just to get to the 5-minute clip of someone with a few words of wisdom. So that's why I saw what you were saying. And I'm like, yay, Doug, go Doug, you're good. You're one of the good guys with the right information. And then they preface you with this horrendous junk, which is so typical.
Yep. Owning a house, as I said in the book, does not necessarily give you stability. It can actually give you an anchor. So if you're offered a line of credit, should you take it or not?
Well, I think you have to make that part of you have to think of it like your mortgage. So let me give an example that's a bit out of the blue, but I thought it up this morning on the train. So average HELOC 70,000. So people don't think much of that. They just kind of go, okay, sure, that's great. This over time, it's not going to bother me. But put yourself back in the scenario of when you bought your house. If you bought in the last few years, it was more likely a bidding war if it was in the city. So what if you were all 5 or 10 of you in there were working with your agent, trying to get that, removing this condition and that, and then it goes up another 5, and we all got to go up 5,000 in our offers. If somebody came in and did a bully offer of 70,000 more than you were offering.
And
you were offering
a bully
8.
offer is just way higher than what everyone else was offering.
You were all in there battling at 800,000, and some jerk came in and said, "I'll give you 870," and everybody said, "That's crazy, I'm out." Well, that 70,000 is exactly the same as the 70 that you were offered by the bank in a HELOC. It's just after the fact instead of at the front. So you would have freaked out with the bully offer, but no problem. Bank offers you 70,000 once you own the house. Hey, no problem. I'll take it.
And 70,000 is 70,000.
It's 70,000.
So whether you're paying
it's
extra
normalization, right? People say 70.
Yeah.
Right?
They don't say 70,000.
Don't say the whole amount every time.
Ooh,
okay?
that's good.
Yeah,
say the whole amount.
Like 1.2. It's 1,200,000.
Yeah.
It sounds different, right?
Yeah, and so whether I pay 800 or 870 for a house, I'm not going that high.
Yeah.
But to tack an extra 70 on at the end on a
Don't even bat
HELOC,
an
no
eye.
problem.
Yeah.
And it's the same 70.
It is the same 70,000. In fact, it's 70,000 that's subject to interest rate rises.
Yeah.
Whereas if the 70 was when you bought, you probably locked it in at whatever, right?
Yeah. So you got much less risk. So I like that. There's your practical advice tip for the day. Say the whole number. Don't say 70. Say 70,000.
Call it what it is. Treat it with the respect it deserves. It's money.
So before we get into the specific methods, do you have any big picture comments you want to start us with as to what someone should do when they are faced with a bunch of debt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I would call it is doing like a personal assessment. You want to understand where you actually stand. Now, this is a bunch of different things, and I think we could go on for a long time, but what it comes down to is Can you make yourself a list of the debts so you can understand who you owe money to and how much? And do you have a sense of what your income is and what your basic living expenses are? That's going to be your starting point. Where do I actually stand right now, and what can I do next?
It's harder.
I think it seems unhelpful, but at the same time, it is helpful for a lot of people to know that they're not missing something. You're not bad at your money. This is something I tell to lots of people. You know why this feels hard? Because it is hard.
Yep.
And because there's a lot of language around finances, which is just make a budget.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit down and make a budget. Like it's a really easy thing. And it's not easy when you have normal income either.
Yep.
It's a difficult process that people whitewash over far too quickly. But when your income is variable, it's even harder.
Yep.
I think for me, what I always start working on with clients here, not only that, making sure you're really set in what you want, but the second big question that we deal with is not income, it's expenses. It's the better you can know your expenses, the more you can understand your income side. You can't start budgeting when you're variable income from an income perspective. I know that the conventional advice often for self-employed people is take your last 2 years and divide that by 12 and use that as a starting number. If your business works that way and it's pretty consistent, great. If you work in the film industry, maybe you were on a big show last year, but you don't have any potential work this year, don't do that unless you have a reason to do that. Start from a place of what do you need?
So I look at my expenses and I see, well, my rent and my grocery, it costs $2,000 a month to live. And then what do I then do with that information?
For sure. So what I work with people, one of the biggest things that I work with people is coming up with a cash flow system. And that involves building a system so that you're paying yourself a salary. And it's basically, you've got an extra step, you know, you don't get a regular salary. You make a system so that you're paying yourself a regular salary. There's no just in the sentence because it takes some time. But the biggest piece of that puzzle is, what would you need to pay yourself? What would you need to pay yourself to make that work? A lot of the work we do there too is separating out business and personal expenses. So you can start seeing lots of sole proprietors don't see any separation between who they are personally and who they are as their business, and start putting those in two different piles. So you can start to make a structure so that when money comes in, whether it's a big month or a low month, you can start to smooth that out and make it so you're getting the same amount that hits your personal account every month.
So what's the problem with that? Like, isn't everybody in that boat? What did you find, to use your word, sexist, predatory, revolting, and particularly heinous about that commercial?
Because it's pulling on all the emotional strings. It's, first of all, that's, I think, Quest Trade or one of them, but it doesn't matter. They all use the same theme. It's essentially, are you a dummy? Are you not with it? Are you not a good provider for your family? Are you not a real man? Which is what I took particular offense to in that case, that the woman, was the incubator of the baby. Great. That's what we do. But, putting the pressure on the partner to say, if you don't get going, like, we're never going to have a home for this child. And all that sexist stereotyping is what feeds into people's fear of missing out, people's compulsion, addiction, to get them gambling, to get them risk taking. I remember there was an ad series in 2007, which was really repulsive as well. And it was older people, and they were talking about how they were day trading now because you've got to be brave. I remember this whole nonsense. And I used to literally throw my socks at the television if it would come on in the morning, because it's just the opposite of the correct information. You should not be trying to manufacture a down payment for your home by stock trading or by taking high flying risk with whatever savings you do have to try and get yourself into a home. And if you're desperately trying to scrape together the down payment like that for a housing market that, for example, is 7 times the average household income, as you know, Doug, and that's just nationally today. That's not even in a large center like Toronto or Vancouver, where it's 10 or 11 or 12 times. I mean, these are the wrong financial decisions for people to try and lever yourself into financial bubbles in the hopes that you're going to just do basics like provide a home for your children. So I just think there's a whole bunch of stereotyping there. It is the right financial decision, as you well know, to sometimes not reach for overvalued house as the dream, because it can be hell's kitchen if you're stressed out financially, fragile. And that's what most Canadians are doing today. So it's not always the best thing, but it's promoted and it's, as I say, dramatized as if that's the smart financial decision. And that's because the advice is coming from the sales side, the product sales side, the credit sales side, the trading platforms. They are all trying to dupe in the little person because it's essentially a Ponzi scheme, Doug. The whole thing's a Ponzi scheme, especially right now. And so they've got to get new blood coming in because the asset managers of the world are already fully loaded. They've already got almost no cash on the books. Everybody that's in is in. So they have to keep trying to sucker in the next little guy and get them to keep the gig going.
So let me play devil's advocate here. I can see why high interest credit card debt is a problem, but why? Because it's high interest. I mean, I get it. Why then are low interest HELOCs a problem? And I understand, okay, interest rates and everything, but $70,000 on a HELOC is a lot less of a worry than $70,000 on credit cards.
Right, but I think you take the whole picture of the economy into account, right? So that's $70,000, right? Plus your eight, we'll call it 800,000 and give it respect.
It's not deserves. 8, yep.
And then you have credit card debt of 30, 40, 50, in our case, 70,000, an average homeowner, and we're in an economy where people are getting downsized. It's the gig economy where anybody under a certain age is working like 2 side jobs, plus they're driving for Uber and they're delivering food. And it's such a precarious employment and income situation. And we see this in Joe Detter. We see this in our work with people, that income is usually the issue. Everybody's living really close to the edge. Not everybody, but there's a big chunk. I think my theory is there's a significant chunk of Canadian society that is living very close to the edge. In other words, could you absorb an impact of any kind? And impacts being divorce, that's a huge one. Job loss.
Well, you have the flu
sickness.
and you're off work for a week.
Yeah, I know.
That's a big shock for a lot of people.
So and if the other studies show that nobody's got any savings, so there isn't a cushion there of cash.
So what is the snowball method? And I'll give you the scenario. I got 5 different debts. That's the scenario.
Mm-hmm. So here's what you're wanting to do if you're looking into the snowball method. You want to line those debts up by the size of the debt. We're not worried at this stage about the minimum payment or necessarily the interest rate. We're looking at the volume of the debt. You've got, let's say, you got an $800 payday loan, $2,000 credit card, $5,000 line of credit, etc. The idea in the snowball method is you're going to try and make your minimum payments on everything. This is a really key point with both of these, is you're not going to neglect any debt if you can avoid it. But any extra cash that you have within whatever your spending limits are, you're going to put that money against those smaller debts. You're going to get rid of them one at a time. You're going to snowball to the next highest debt with what that payment was. You're going to just try and work on them a piece at a time.
And why would I do that?
I think it's a sense of accomplishment. So this is where my sort of example that I give all the time of this is the weekend chores. So I will typically have, unless there's something important that I have to be at or something, I'll typically have, a bit of a list of things that I want to get done in a weekend. I am a creature of going after the low-hanging fruit. So if you give me a choice between taking down the Christmas lights or throwing on a load of laundry, I am going after that load of laundry like nobody's business. I can check that thing off the list. It's a simpler thing to do. Then it allows me some time to put into the next thing. And I feel like I'm accomplishing something, even if the whole list doesn't get done.
To be going to school, you need to be networking with people, you need to go on a ton of auditions that you won't get, because this is just the same as networking in business. You don't get the first job that you go for.
Any salesperson has to make many pitches to get one sale. And so when you're singing in a French or Italian opera, do you actually understand what you're saying?
You have to understand what you're saying at a certain level. So what they teach us to do is, even if you're not fluent, they teach us how to cheat. So you take diction courses, and we break down the language into the International Phonetic Alphabet so that you can learn the sounds. And then you translate every word, and even if you don't speak French or you don't speak German, you know this German, and you know what you're expressing.
Right.
It's, if you want the kind of analogy that I make with my clients all the time, this is exactly like finances. You don't need to figure out the whole language. You need to figure out the sentence that you know how to speak.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the language that's in front of you. You need to know every acronym. You don't need to know every investing strategy. You need to understand your investing strategy. You understand the RSP that you have. That's all. You need to understand why you're doing that. That makes you good at money.
Gotcha.
So it isn't always in everyone's best interest to jump into an asset regardless of price. And that's my best advice to people is it's always in your best interest to build up savings, to spend less than you make, to find cost-effective ways to live. And right now, if that means renting something, sharing rent with other people, moving out of urban areas to somewhere where you can live cheap. If it does mean living with your extended family for a period of time because you want to save money, because you're trying to get your nest egg. And I think that the bottom line is the world is full of people trying to take your nest egg who are incented by commissions to get your nest egg into various things. And the real estate market right now is just a frenzy of genius advisors, which are all collecting commissions on the front end.
So I think when you look at HELOCs are not a problem in and of themselves, but you got to look at the whole thing you've got going on, right? Because when I have people call me as recently as yesterday who are homeowners with HELOCs and second mortgages and all kinds of stuff, they have a number of things going on in their lives, right? And so they've gotten to the place where they're at where it's taken time for all these little factors to come into play, but it's death by a thousand cuts again, right? So yes, the HELOC's a good idea, but make sure you can afford the thing if it changes. Make sure that you can afford all the other things in your life. So in other words, if you've got $30,000 in credit card debt, don't take the HELOC.
Yeah.
Not yet. Pay that down and then do it. Like, you don't need to do that right now. So it's wants and needs, right?
Well, so let's finish this off then with your advice. So you just gave a piece of advice there. Right. I mean, I still think the best advice is say the full number. So we probably should have just ended the show right there.
$1.2 million.
$1.2 million.
Say it like, what's his name in Austin Powers?
Million. It's a big number.
Yeah.
But I think the next point you just made is if you're going to be getting a HELOC to pay off your credit cards, okay, I understand why that makes sense. Cancel the credit cards then, or lower the limits on them or something, because paying them off and then racking them up again wasn't really paying them off.
That's the other big takeaway from this one, folks, what Doug just said. We usually see when people consolidate their debts, the reason they come back in to see us again a year from now is because they didn't cancel their cards.
Yep.
Right? So if you are going to tackle the debt before you take the HELOC, which is what you should do, cut the cards up. Because I can't tell you the rate of recidivism on that stuff. People, if it's there, you're going to use it again, right?
Okay, that's the good part about the Snowball method. What's the bad part then?
Well, here we are late in the year, and I still have Christmas lights on the outside of my house. But where it draws into the debt side is if you are paying the smallest debt and not paying attention to the size of the interest on the debt that you're paying, there is a serious risk that it's going to take you more time and cost you more money to get out of debt, because really what is the harmful part of debt is the interest rate, how much money you're paying to owe it. So if you are going after the small stuff instead of the larger interest, you might actually be costing yourself more money and time. I can tell you, it's no fun taking Christmas lights down in November and you got to put them right back up.
Now, you hit on a key area, which was taxes.
Yeah.
And so what you said was, so I'm making $6,000 at this show I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it only cost me $2,000 a month to live, but I didn't really make $6,000 because at the end of the year when I file my taxes, I'm going to owe money. So your strategy for dealing with that is to
right off the top, right away,
literally have a separate account, and that's where I
often
dump it
in a
into.
separate bank.
So it's totally out, so I can't touch it. Would you ever recommend to a client, just send the money to Revenue Canada?
Some people do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in effect, you're making installments.
Some people do. Some people, I've had clients just kind of sending it straight there all the time. Mm-hmm. It depends on the personality. Some people, if they see that money in the account, they're going to rate it. So you put it in a separate bank. Some people don't want to. I think the majority of people want to spend as little time thinking about their money as possible.
Yeah, and I understand I don't want to be giving Revenue Canada money early, and if I work 6 months and then I don't work 6 months, then maybe I don't owe as much in taxes. So
this is why I don't get along with the engineers, because in my mind I say I don't really care about giving money to the taxes early if it's going to mean that you don't have tax debt come tax time.
Yeah.
So you can't get savings until you get out of debt. So that's the first thing. So focus on yes, have some emergency savings, which I'm sure you always talk to people about as well. But the biggest risk is the levered risk, because life is full of unknowns and surprises. So when you have leverage, when you have debt, you've already made yourself more susceptible, more vulnerable to life's surprises. So getting out of the hole is the first thing. And that means, trying to maintain your personal discipline around finances. Obviously, you need some income. You got to figure out a way. I think people underestimate how valuable different pots of income are. Even things like just, small pensions they may have from some past employment, or Canada pension plan. People underestimate what a huge part of one's retirement plan that can be. And they think, oh, well, I'm not going to contribute to that. A lot of self-employed people make that mistake and that sort of thing. Anyway, so getting out of debt and then building up savings, and not getting stuck into the mania of, like, it's a hot potato that you've got to toss into whatever someone tells you to toss it at because, you're desperate to make it grow. Compound interest over time comes from doing the diligent, constant, low risk, reinvesting of income as it comes in over your lifetime. That's really where strength and stability comes from. So, and realizing that all this, all these clicks and baits and algorithms are all designed to snag at your psychology, to sucker you in. And sometimes I've heard this from many people, even people who retire with good resources, lots of savings and all that. They start trying to do the stock picking thing because they're bombarded daily with, well, if you're brave, if you're smart, if you're wise, if if you're a good provider, you're going to try and double or nothing. I mean, that kind of thing. And then what they do is they ultimately, sometimes it's quite common that it's a slippery slope to psychological torment, because whether it's gone up that day or down that day, whether they've lost or not, and they miss out on the things they're supposed to be focusing on about health and well-being and their life and their family. So, it can be very dangerous. So it's not that you shouldn't take a flyer if you want to, I say, if you want to gamble with some of your money, but I think people are better when they gamble typically, unless they're addicted to gambling, but they're often better with saying, I'm going to carve out $500 or $5,000, and that's my gambling fund. And if it goes, I'm not going to put more in, and I'm not going to be considered wise if I win. I'm going to be considered lucky, right? So it's a totally different mindset. And that's why I think the financial sector, with all of its bombarding us, is particularly dangerous to our psychological well-being and our financial well-being.
If there was a $20 bill sitting on the table, one of us would pick it up.
Yep.
Because that's just how it is.
I don't think you'd beat me to it, but one of us would get it.
We'd probably rip it in two as we went for it. That's just the way it is. So, are there any other pieces of advice then that we haven't hit on here that people need to be aware of?
Well, okay. So if you are in the kind of scenario where you got all kinds of balls in the air, like the people that are calling us sometimes, you got a mortgage, you got maybe a second mortgage, maybe a HELOC. You and your husband or you and your wife are both working jobs where you're not entirely, like, you're not going to be there 30 years risk-free. You just,
it's not a thing.
Your job could change, you could move. You got a couple of kids, so those kids they're factors. They're big factors, right? Because, okay, they're healthy right now, maybe they won't be. But without freaking people out, look at your entire picture and say, okay, what are my big risks here in any one of these things, right? Can I keep going here for even 3 months if anything happened, right? And it never hurts to talk to somebody, because, I mean, how many people that come to see us do end up filing?
Well, certainly less than half.
Right. So we talk to a whole bunch of people, thousands of people, who we just give them advice on what they should do about debt and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are some people who come, and we'll say, you know what, you've got a lot of equity in your house, so if you're willing to cut up the cards, then a HELOC maybe makes sense for you. Pay them off, and you don't need to be doing a proposal or going bankrupt or anything.
And it costs them nothing to talk, right? So if you have a lot of debt, you're not necessarily in trouble. But it doesn't hurt to, if you're stressed out about it and if you're thinking about it like that, just talk to somebody, right? Because at least you'll know your rights, you'll know what you can do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Because oftentimes it's don't make sure you don't do this or this, because you'll get in even worse trouble, right? Yeah,
stress is an excellent indicator of whether you've got a problem. So if I own $1 million house and have a $500,000 mortgage, $500,000 is a huge number, but I'm not really in that bad a problem because I can sell the house and get out of it. If I don't own a house and I have $500,000 $100,000 in debt, I'm probably toast unless my income's $1 million a year. So I would be under a lot of stress in that situation. That's a good indication that you need to reach out for help.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. And that tip again, folks, say the whole number just in case you missed it.
And cut up your cards.
So in the debt avalanche method, you are prioritizing interest. So tell me the story again, but this time prioritize interest.
Yeah. So in this method, the plan would be not to line up the debts based on the size of the debt, but on the interest rate. And again, the purpose here is to stay on top of everything. So you're wanting to make your minimum payments on all of them, but you're wanting to take any extra free cash flow and put it towards the highest interest debts first, because the more you pay off on the higher interest rate debt, the less interest you will accumulate the next month and going forward. It will save you money over time. So the issue with doing it in this method is you're allowing debts to linger. That sense of accomplishment takes longer to get to. So you're saving more money, and you know this, you can prove it on paper, but you're still seeing those higher number of debts sitting out that you're not getting that immediate sense of accomplishment you do with the Snowball.
Well, I guess it's more administratively complex having 5 debts instead of 3, because of course they each have a different due date each month. And so now I'm trying to juggle. So by paying off the smaller debts first, they're done, they're cleaned up. Now I only have to worry about 3 payments each month instead of 5. Right. And therefore I guess I'm more likely to do it. So really your answer to the question, which one should you use, is psychology as much as money.
I think so. And I think there's also the question of, is either of them actually going to help you? And I mean, maybe this is delving into a whole other topic, but is either of them actually going to get you anywhere in the medium to long term? Are you actually making progress paying off a couple of little debts or paying off a portion of a higher interest debt? I think you want to take, I'm not sure if I love this word, but a bit more of a holistic approach to your finances. Am I actually paying down the debt? Is it actually getting smaller? Is there a chance that other things are not getting paid or that other debts are getting taken on?
Okay, let's talk about that. And I don't know what the word holistic means because I'm not as smart as you. I don't have as much book learning, but let me ask the question in a different way then. How much debt is too much to be trying either one of these methods? Because obviously if I've got $100,000 worth of debt and I do the math and I can afford $100 a month, okay, it's going to take me 17 lifetimes, I think, to pay that off. Right. So how do I calculate what the upper limit is when, you know what, neither method is going to work for me?
It's an excellent question. And I'm going to use another term I like, critical mass. I think there is a critical mass of debt for any individual or family that once you go beyond that massive debt, you're simply never going to pay it off. It's not going to work. You're going to need another method. Now, there's a few different ways that you could measure this. You could measure income versus total debt. You could measure certain ratios and so on. And honestly, that gets too complicated for me to really figure out. But here's my method of figuring it out. If you take your monthly net income and you subtract from that your most vital expenses, we all know what those are. You got to live somewhere. You got to eat something. You probably have places to go. And then you look at your minimum payments, your absolute minimum payments before you start talking about throwing money at other debts. Well, if the expenses and the minimum debt payments are higher than the income, you have reached critical mass. You no longer get the benefit of either a debt snowball or a debt avalanche method because there's no extra money to pay down those debts.
Thanks for watching. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe, and don't forget to click that bell for new show notifications. Until next time, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.